You ever imagined being trapped in a high-speed train with a mysterious creature at your back? Get ready for a journey of fear and adrenaline that will test your limits. Chapter 1. The Boarding. So, let me tell you how it all started. It was an ordinary night. Nothing special. Except I needed to catch the train to get home. The station was a bit empty. Just me and a few scattered passengers. The lights inside were flickering oddly, but I didn't pay much attention. The train had to arrive soon. When I got to the platform, I saw the train approaching, making that screeching metal noise. What I didn't know was that things inside would get quite strange. As soon as the train stopped, the doors opened, and I hopped on quickly. Seriously, I just wanted to get home and sleep. The carriage was somewhat crowded, but the atmosphere was tense. I squeezed into a corner, trying to ignore the crowd chatting. Some guys were laughing, but there was another one next to me who seemed to be staring directly at me. It was like he wanted to say something, but wasn't saying anything. The feeling was strange, like when someone is watching you and you feel a chill down your spine. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was just my imagination. As the train began to move, I noticed that the flickering lights were getting more intense, as if they were about to burst at any moment. The sound banging against the windows seemed to increase. The rest of the people inside seemed to be minding their own business, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. The train jolted, and with each movement, it felt like someone was whispering my name. A woman in front of me, with a vacant look, suddenly began to babble. No one paid attention, but I couldn't look away from her. It was as if she knew something I didn't. I barely had time to think because deep down, a little voice in my head started screaming, "Get off this train." But you know that feeling when you're caught between wanting to leave and the fear of being the only one to react. Little did I know that this was just the calm before the storm. Chapter 2. The Journey. The journey continued, and the atmosphere became heavier. The sound of the tracks echoed, and I could barely hear the other passengers. The murmur of the woman still lingered in my mind, and I wondered if she had any connection to what was about to happen. It was as if the train had a mind of its own, dragging us to a place no one wanted to go. The lights began to flicker faster, and I couldn't tell if there was something wrong with the electricity or if my mind was playing tricks on me. Around me, people seemed quieter. Some appeared to be hypnotized, staring into nothingness. The face of the guy who had been staring at me before now bore a strange expression, as if he were enjoying the tension in the air. Then, the train jolted, and I sat back down, thinking I was going to fall. The bathroom was right there, and I thought about getting up, but something held me back. The idea of leaving my spot and walking through the carriage felt scarier than staying put and waiting for the next station. Suddenly, the train began to slow down. The sound of the brakes was deafening, and a part of me thought we were finally arriving. But instead, the light went out completely, and everything turned dark. Seriously, total pitch black. And then, a scream pierced the silence, and I almost jumped out of my skin. It was a woman who had been sitting by the window. Now she was standing, wide-eyed. Every second felt like an eternity. And what terrified me most was not knowing where that scream had come from. I tried to see something, any silhouette, but all I got was shadows dancing in the darkness. The air was thick, and the feeling that something was about to happen heightened. The train continued to slow down, but it didn't stop. I peeked out the window, but all I saw was the darkness of the night outside. The train continued on, but we all started to feel that this was not just any journey. A part of my mind was screaming for me to get off, and the other part was frozen in fear. What was happening? Why didn't that train stop? We were all at the mercy of the unknown, and I had no idea what would come next. Chapter 3: The Disappearance. The darkness persisted, and what should have been a simple ride was turning into a nightmare. The woman's scream still echoed in my mind, and with the train's light out, fear spread like a contagious disease. Amid all this, I felt my heartbeat quickening. The silence was so oppressive that each beat seemed to revert it. Then suddenly, the light flickered back on, but not in the way I expected. The lights were flickering erratically, only increasing the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The train, which should have been slowing down, kept moving. The woman's face was now pale, and she seemed frozen, not knowing what to do. And then, in the midst of the general nervousness, something strange began to happen. Some passengers started looking at each other in a weird way, as if they were passing silent messages among themselves. One of the guys at the far end of the carriage suddenly stood up and made his way to the aisle. He looked nervous, his fingers trembling, and everyone watched him. But no one said anything. Then suddenly, the disheveled guy started screaming again. Someone is missing. Someone has disappeared. And at that moment, I realized that I hadn't seen one of the passengers who was sitting near the door. His absence was palpable, and the murmurs in the cabin grew. Voices began to overlap. Someone was talking about a boy who had gotten up to go to the bathroom and hadn't returned. Now the atmosphere was boiling. Everyone was restless, and the tension seemed to manifest physically, like a weight on our chests. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened to him. Where was that guy? Why hadn't anyone gotten up to go after him? Then, the pale woman who had been screaming turned and, with a terrified look, pointed to the back of the carriage. "He's back there. He's back there." My heart raced, and for a moment, everything stopped. I looked back but only saw shadows and the dark corridor. The atmosphere was charged. I could smell fear in the air. Then, amidst the agitation, the train jolted again, and the lights went out once more. Panic started to take over. People were screaming, trying to get up and move anywhere. But what I didn't realize at that moment was that, as the light went out, the sensation of being watched returned with full force. Chapter 4: The Encounter. The lights went out, and the train plunged into the darkness. It was as if claustrophobia took over everyone. I felt people pushing, trying to get out, but there was nowhere to go. What bothered me most was the feeling of something, or someone, moving at the back of the carriage. Then, the light flickered again, and I saw a shadow. It was quick and disappeared as soon as the light returned. It was like a whisper lost in the air. Everyone was in a panic, and the woman who had been at the front, the one who had screamed, was now desperately leaning against the wall, her face a picture of true terror. "There's something back there," I saw it. She shouted, and her voice was so anguished that I felt a chill in my stomach. The nervous guy who had stood up earlier had returned. He stood by the door of the carriage, trying to catch his breath. Everyone looked at him, and the atmosphere was so tense you could cut it with a knife. This guy looked around, somewhat lost, and then, without warning, shouted out of nowhere, "Let's stop playing and tell me what's going on here." The desperation in his voice echoed, but the reality was nobody knew. The train started to speed up again, and the sound of the tracks grew louder. I thought it was a nightmare because each jolt made me feel we could derail at any moment. The fan started making noise, and the feeling that this would never end drove me even more insane. And, as if that wasn't enough, the woman screaming at the front began to convulse, as if she were fighting against something invisible. What I didn't expect was to hear a noise coming from the bathroom. It was a light sound, but it made everyone hush. All eyes turned to the bathroom door, as if we were waiting for something or someone to come out. Time seemed to stand still. I was almost holding my breath, waiting for the door to open. but nothing happened. Then, the light flickered again, and this time, for a moment, I managed to spot that silhouette at the end of the carriage. It was as if it were watching everything, a dark outline, without definition, almost like a shadow that didn't belong to this world. My stomach churned, and sweat began to roll down my forehead. What was that? Was it just a passenger passing by? Or was it something much worse? Now, along with the fearful reactions of the people around me, a low growl emerged, something between a moan and a howl. What was back there? Something was about to happen, and I didn't know if I was ready to face it. Eyes crossed in a silence full of fear. In a moment of clarity, I realized that this scene could become a real nightmare. And deep down, everyone had the same question on their minds. Who or what was with us on that train? Chapter 5: The Arrival. The silence was so heavy that you could hear the hurried breathing of everyone there. The silhouette at the back moved a little, and everyone froze. I was holding my heart in my hands, barely able to think. The train continued to accelerate, but it felt like time had come to a standstill. That shadow seemed more and more real, and with each passing second, I wondered who or what it was. Someone, please, do something. The woman screamed desperately, and I felt the pressure mounting. Another person turned to her. But how? What do you want us to do? Desperation was taking over, and a wave of complaints began to echo through the carriage. Everyone wanted to leave, but there was no way. No one had the answers we needed. And then, amid all this, the bathroom door opened with a chilling creak. The guy who had come out of there looked different. He was pale, his eyes wide, as if he had seen a ghost. He stood there in the doorway, trembling, and made a movement to back away as if he wanted to hide from something. My stomach dropped. What had he encountered in there? The woman who had screamed began to approach him. Did you see what it was? What happened? You need to tell us. But he just stood there, as if in shock. The silence intensified again, everyone waiting. Then, the nervous guy had an idea and started shouting. I think we should split up and search. Everyone looked at him, as if he'd suggested something absurd. What if we get attacked? What if someone doesn't come back? A woman near me spoke, but his proposal seemed to be the only way out. In the midst of the discussion, the silhouette at the opposite end shifted again. Now it was more defined, a well-defined shadow. The guy from the bathroom took a step back and leaned against the wall, his expression one of total panic. It was then that a deep scream cut through the air, and someone fell to the ground. I couldn't see who it was, but panic took hold of everyone. A quick movement, and then I saw the train's light partially illuminate what was there. It was a creature, not a person. Something with glowing eyes and sharp teeth. The train shook, and the lights flickered faster, almost as if the train itself was calling the creature. Everyone stick together. No one separates. I shouted without knowing if it was a good idea. But it was all I could think of. People began to huddle closely together, and the fear was written on everyone's face. What was that thing? The charged atmosphere of adrenaline was about to explode. I realized that if we didn't do something soon, that train might not be our home for much longer. The nervous guy looked openly at the creature and suddenly began to move toward it, as if in a trance. No, what was he doing? Hey, come back. I tried to shout, but his voice had already been interrupted by the sound of the creature approaching. The feeling that something truly terrifying was about to happen filled the carriage, and the only thing left was the hope that we could face this together. If you enjoyed this spine-tingling adventure and want to see what happens next, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave your like and share your opinion in the comments. Together, let's unravel this mystery.